For nearly 2 decades, millions of viewers tuned in to watch a family unlike any other. A family that turned struggle into strength, and a small patch of land into one of the most recognizable farms in America. Roloff Farms wasn't just property, it was a symbol. A symbol of hard work, resilience, and a dream that seemed destined to stay within the family for generations. At the center of it all was Matt, the visionary, the builder, the man who poured years of sweat, creativity, and relentless determination into turning that land into something truly extraordinary. And standing beside him for much of that journey was Amy, a partner in both life and business. But as time passed, cracks began to form. What once looked like a united front slowly turned into something far more complicated, filled with disagreements, emotional distance, and decisions that would ultimately change everything. Fans saw parts of it unfold on screen. The tension, the disagreements over the farm, the uncertainty about the future. But what they didn't fully see was just how deep those issues really went. And more importantly, how quickly everything would spiral. Because behind the scenes, something happened that would shift the entire trajectory of the Roloff legacy, almost overnight. To understand what really happened, you have to go back to the beginning. Long before the cameras, before the fame, before the family became household names, there was just a dream. A dream to build something meaningful. Roloff Farms didn't become what it is by accident. It took years of planning, risk-taking, and an incredible amount of sacrifice. Matt wasn't just maintaining land, he was constantly expanding it, improving it, and imagining new possibilities. From elaborate attractions to seasonal events, he transformed the farm into an experience. And Amy played a huge role too. While Matt focused on the big picture vision, Amy was often the emotional backbone, raising the kids, maintaining stability, and ensuring the family stayed grounded. Together, they built something that felt unbreakable. But here's the truth that many fans didn't fully realize. Even during the good years, there were differences in how they saw the future. Differences in priorities. Differences in control. And those differences didn't just disappear, they grew. Slowly, quietly, until they became impossible to ignore. So when the idea of passing the farm down to the next generation started becoming real, it wasn't just a business decision. It was personal, emotional, and potentially explosive. Because what should have been a proud moment for the family turned into something no one expected. And what happened next would set the stage for that shocking 48-hour period that changed everything. For over a decade, viewers of Little People, Big World watched the highs and lows of the Roloff family unfold. Milestones, disagreements, and deeply personal moments all playing out on screen. At the heart of their story stood Roloff Farms, more than just land. It was a symbol of legacy, sacrifice, and a dream that was supposed to carry forward for generations. But as the years passed, it became clear that not everything was as picture-perfect as it seemed. Behind the scenes, unresolved tensions were quietly building. The relationship between Amy Roloff and Matt Roloff had already endured a major shift, from marriage to a very public divorce. Yet their shared connection to the farm kept their lives intertwined in complicated ways. What made things even more intense was the expectation that the farm would eventually stay within the family. Fans watched closely as conversations about ownership, inheritance, and the future began to surface, especially involving their children who had grown up on that very land. Then came a turning point that no one saw coming. What appeared on the surface as a business decision quickly revealed itself to be something much deeper, layered with emotion, disagreement, and long-standing differences. To many viewers, it felt like everything unraveled almost overnight, but in reality, this moment had been building for years. In this video, we're going beyond what was shown on TV to explore the deeper story. What really led to this breaking point, what may not have been fully revealed, and why this moment could have permanently changed the legacy of the Roloff family forever. As the years passed, What once felt like a shared dream slowly began to evolve into two very different perspectives. Matt remained focused on expansion, innovation, and the long-term business potential of the farm. He constantly envisioned new projects, bigger attractions, more visitors, and greater financial growth. To him, the farm represented possibility, a living project that could always be improved and reimagined. Amy, on the other hand, saw something far more personal. While she appreciated what the farm had become, her connection was rooted in memories rather than future plans. Every corner of the property held emotional value: the birthdays, the family gatherings, the everyday moments that never made it onto camera. For her, preserving that sense of home mattered more than turning it into an ever-growing enterprise. This growing difference in priorities didn't happen overnight. It developed quietly over time, often hidden beneath the surface of daily life. On the outside, everything still appeared functional. The farm continued to operate, events were held, and traditions carried on. But internally, the foundation was beginning to shift. Decisions that once came easily now required difficult conversations. Simple ideas turned into disagreements. What used to be teamwork slowly became compromise, and eventually, tension. The farm, once a symbol of unity, was becoming a source of conflict. There were also bigger questions looming in the background. What would happen to the farm in the future? Would it stay in the family? Who would take it over? These weren't just business decisions, they were deeply emotional ones, tied to legacy, identity, and control. For Matt, securing the farm's future meant making strategic choices, even if they were tough. For Amy, those same choices sometimes felt like letting go of something irreplaceable. And as those viewpoints continued to clash, it became clear that the farm could no longer represent both of their visions at the same time. This quiet divide was setting the stage for a major turning point, one that would not only reshape the future of the farm, but also redefine the entire family dynamic. Amy and Matt's relationship was never simple, and that complexity didn't end when their marriage did. From the outside, it once looked like a partnership built on resilience. They faced challenges together, raised a family, and built something meaningful from the ground up. The farm stood as proof of what they could accomplish when they worked toward the same goal. But beneath that shared success, cracks had been forming for years. Their personalities were fundamentally different. Matt was a visionary, always thinking ahead, always planning the next big idea, always willing to take risks to expand the farm into something bigger. Amy, on the other hand, valued stability. For her, the farm wasn't just a project. It was a home filled with memories, traditions, and emotional roots. And those differences didn't just create tension, they created distance. Over time, disagreements that once seemed small began to carry more weight. Decisions about the farm weren't just business choices, they became reflections of deeper conflicts about priorities, control, and identity. Even after their divorce, those differences didn't disappear. If anything, they became harder to manage. Because now, instead of working as a married couple trying to compromise, they were two separate individuals, each with their own vision, still tied to the same piece of land. The farm became both a connection and a battleground. Every decision required communication. Every plan required agreement. And every disagreement had the potential to reopen old wounds. Boundaries, which are already difficult after a divorce, became even more blurred. Where did business end and personal history begin? Where did one person's authority stop and the other's begin? Those lines were never clearly defined. And that lack of clarity created ongoing friction. There were moments when things seemed peaceful, times when they appeared to work together for the sake of the family, especially during big events or milestones. But even in those moments, there was often an underlying tension, something unspoken but deeply felt. Because unresolved emotions don't simply fade with time. They linger. They resurface in unexpected ways, through disagreements, through misunderstandings, through decisions that feel bigger than they should. And while the show gave viewers glimpses into their dynamic, many fans sensed there was more beneath the surface. moments that felt incomplete, conversations that seemed edited down, conflicts that appeared to resolve too quickly. It left people wondering, what weren't we seeing? Because when two people share not just a history, but a legacy, something as significant as the farm, it's never just about the present. It's about everything that came before. Every sacrifice, every argument, every compromise that worked, and every one that didn't. And when those experiences remain unresolved, they don't stay in the past. They shape every decision moving forward. So when Amy and Matt found themselves trying to manage the same legacy with completely different visions, the outcome almost felt inevitable. One wanted to preserve what was. The other wanted to transform what could be. And when those two perspectives collide, without clear boundaries, without full resolution, and without a shared path forward, eventually, something has to give. And then came the moment that changed everything. It didn't happen with a dramatic announcement. No explosive argument caught clearly on camera. No single scene where everything fell apart all at once. Instead, it unfolded quietly, almost subtly, like a shift you could feel more than see. There was a noticeable change in tone. Conversations that once felt collaborative suddenly carried an edge. Simple discussions about the future of the farm began to sound more like negotiations. Words were chosen more carefully. Reactions became more guarded. And underneath it all, there was tension that couldn't be ignored anymore. One of the biggest points of friction was the question no one could avoid. Who would take over the farm? For years, it had been talked about as a shared dream, a legacy meant to be passed down. But when the time came to actually make decisions, that dream became complicated. Expectations didn't align. Visions for the future didn't match. And what once seemed like a natural transition turned into a deeply personal conflict. You could see it in the small moments. The pauses before answering a question. The forced smiles during serious conversations. The way certain topics were quickly changed or avoided altogether. Fans started picking up on these details. Online discussions began to grow, with viewers analyzing every scene, every interaction, every glance. People questioned whether what they were seeing was the full truth, or just a carefully edited version designed to keep things from unraveling too publicly. And that's where things get even more interesting. Reality television, by its nature, tells a story, but it doesn't always tell the entire story. Scenes are cut, timelines are adjusted, conversations are shortened. So when tensions started rising around the future of the farm, many believed that what made it to the screen was only a fraction of what was really happening behind closed doors. Some insiders and longtime followers of the show have suggested that disagreements went deeper than just business. They point to emotional history, years of unresolved issues, differences in communication styles, and lingering feelings from the past that never fully disappeared. Because this wasn't just about land. It was about identity, control, legacy, and perhaps most importantly, respect. When those elements collide within a family, things can escalate quickly, even if it doesn't look dramatic on the surface. And then there were the decisions. Quiet at first, but powerful. Choices that hinted something bigger was happening. Moves that suggested plans were changing, fast. To the audience, it might have seemed sudden. But for those involved, this had been building for a long time. All the small disagreements, all the unspoken frustrations, all the moments that didn't quite make sense. They were leading to this turning point. A moment where things could no longer stay the way they were. And once that line was crossed, there was no going back. What happened next is what many fans now point to as the moment everything truly unraveled. After years of tension, compromise, and emotional back and forth, the situation between Amy Roloff and Matt Roloff reached a critical breaking point, and it all seemed to escalate in less than 48 hours. For a long time, the future of the farm had been uncertain. Conversations had been ongoing, decisions delayed, and emotions kept just beneath the surface. But then, suddenly, something shifted. A decision was made, firm, irreversible, and impossible to ignore. Amy took a step that many believe had been building for years. It wasn't impulsive. It wasn't random. In fact, if you look closely, the signs had always been there. The hesitation, the frustration, the desire to finally close a chapter that had remained open for far too long. But timing is everything. To some, Amy's move felt like an act of independence, a declaration that she was ready to move forward. No longer tied to the past or to decisions that no longer aligned with her life. It was seen as a necessary step, even a courageous one, especially after years of emotional complexity following their divorce. To others, however, it felt very different. From Matt's perspective, this wasn't just a decision. It was a turning point that altered the trajectory of something he had spent decades building. The farm wasn't just land or business. It was a vision, a legacy, something deeply personal. And in a matter of hours, that vision seemed to shift in a way he may not have fully expected or been prepared for. What makes this moment so powerful is how quickly everything changed. There were no long, drawn-out negotiations shown publicly. No gradual transition that audiences could follow step by step. Instead, it felt abrupt. Sudden, almost like a door quietly closing, but echoing loudly afterward. And that's where the real question begins. Was this truly a sudden decision that caught everyone off guard? Or was this the inevitable result of years of unresolved tension, difficult conversations, and emotional strain that had finally reached a point where something had to give? Because when you look back, the clues start to form a clearer picture. The ongoing disagreements about the future of the farm, the emotional weight of shared history, the challenges of maintaining boundaries after a divorce while still being tied together through business and family. Each of these factors added pressure over time, pressure that didn't disappear, but instead slowly built beneath the surface. So when that 48-hour window arrived, it may not have been the beginning of the end. It may have simply been the moment everything that had been building finally came to the surface. And once it did, there was no going back. What had once been a private family matter quickly spilled into the public eye, pulling everyone connected to the situation into an emotional whirlwind. Within hours, reactions began to surface, not just from those directly involved, but from a growing audience that had followed this family for years. Inside the family, the tension was undeniable. Each member found themselves in a difficult position, torn between loyalty, personal beliefs, and the weight of history. Some tried to remain neutral, choosing silence over conflict. Others struggled to hide their emotions, as years of built-up feelings suddenly came rushing to the surface. Conversations that were once calm became strained. Simple discussions turned into deeper disagreements. And in many ways, it wasn't just about one decision anymore. It was about everything that had led up to it. There were questions that no one seemed to have clear answers to. Was this outcome inevitable? Could things have been handled differently? Or had this moment been quietly building for years, waiting for the right or wrong trigger? For some within the family, Amy's decision felt like a bold step forward. A move that finally drew a clear line after years of emotional complexity. They saw it as necessary, perhaps even overdue. But for others, it felt like something much heavier. A loss. A disruption. A decision that didn't just change the present, but erased a version of the future they had always imagined. And then there was Matt's perspective. For him, this wasn't just about a disagreement, it was deeply personal. Everything he had built, planned, and envisioned now felt uncertain. The farm wasn't just property, it was purpose. And suddenly, that purpose seemed to be slipping out of reach. That emotional weight didn't go unnoticed. Fans, who had spent years watching the family grow and evolve, reacted almost instantly. Social media became the center of a growing divide, one that mirrored the tension within the family itself. On one side, there were those who supported Amy. They believed she had every right to make the decision she did. That after everything she had experienced, this was about reclaiming control, about choosing what was best for her, regardless of how difficult it might be. They praised her strength, her independence, her willingness to make a tough call, even knowing the backlash it might bring. But on the other side, there were those who stood firmly with Matt. They saw him as someone who had poured years of dedication into building something meaningful. To them, this wasn't just about business, it was about legacy, about preserving something that was meant to be passed down, not broken apart. They questioned the timing, the approach, and whether there could have been another way. As these perspectives clashed online, the conversation grew louder. Comments turned into debates. Debates turned into arguments. And before long, it wasn't just a discussion, it was a full-blown divide. Some fans even began revisiting past moments, analyzing old episodes, looking for clues that might explain how things reached this point. Small details that once seemed insignificant suddenly took on new meaning. A pause in a conversation. A look exchanged between family members. A disagreement that didn't seem fully resolved. To many, it now felt like the signs had always been there, just hidden beneath the surface. But beyond the opinions, beyond the debates and speculation, one truth stood out above everything else. Things had changed. Not temporarily. Not slightly. But permanently. The dynamic that once defined the family, the balance they had tried to maintain despite past challenges, was no longer the same. Something had shifted in a way that couldn't be undone. And perhaps the most difficult part of it all was that no one could say for certain what would happen next. Would relationships heal or grow more distant? Would new paths bring clarity or more conflict? And could the family ever find a way back to something that resembled what they once had? For now, those questions remained unanswered. Now, everything comes down to one question: what happens next? For years, the farm stood as more than just property. It was a living symbol of everything the family had built together. Every corner held meaning. Every structure told a story. But now, that sense of certainty has been replaced by something far more fragile: uncertainty. With ownership decisions already made and emotions still running high, the idea of the farm continuing as it once did feels increasingly unlikely. What was once a shared vision has slowly fractured into separate paths, each shaped by different priorities, different experiences, and different ideas of what the future should look like. For Matt, the dream was always about expansion and legacy, turning the farm into something bigger than just a family home. A destination, a long-term investment, something that could grow beyond generations. For Amy, it was never just about growth. It was about preservation, about holding onto the emotional core of what the farm represented, a place where their children grew up, where traditions were formed, and where memories still live. And now, those two visions no longer coexist. So where does that leave the future? There's a real possibility that the farm, as fans once knew it, may never return in the same way. Whether it changes ownership, evolves into something entirely different, or simply fades from the spotlight, the identity of the farm is already shifting. And then there's the next generation. For years, there was speculation, hope, even, that one of the children would eventually take over, that the legacy would continue through them. But with past negotiations falling through and tensions lingering, that future now feels more uncertain than ever. Will they step back in, or has that opportunity already passed? At the same time, the family itself continues to move forward, separately. New homes, new priorities, new chapters that don't necessarily revolve around the farm anymore. And maybe that's the biggest shift of all. Because what once acted as the center of everything is no longer holding everyone together. For fans, this is more than just a change in property ownership. It feels like the closing of a chapter they've followed for years. A story that began with hope, growth, and togetherness, now facing an ending that no one quite expected. But endings don't always mean everything is lost. Sometimes, they simply mark the moment when things begin to change, permanently. The legacy of the farm may never fully disappear, The memories, the milestones, the impact it had, not just on the family, but on everyone who watched their journey, those things remain. But the future, it won't look the same. And maybe that's the truth that's hardest to accept. At its core, this story isn't just about a farm. It's about relationships, choices, and the ripple effects that come when long-standing tensions finally reach a breaking point. Whether you see Amy's actions as justified or feel that Matt's vision was lost too soon, one thing is clear. The reality behind the headlines is far more complex than what appeared on TV. Sometimes, the biggest moments aren't the ones we see. They're the ones that unfold quietly behind the scenes. Thank you for watching, and until next time, keep questioning what lies beneath the surface.